All right, hello, and it's silverkyle, and today we're going to be going over my TBR for November 2023. So this is all the books that I hope to finish in the month of November. We'll see how far I get with that. I did add on one here that if I end up finishing the other four, I'll dive into that one as well. I've already started two of these. One of them I started in October, and the other one I just started yesterday, so it does still count as fully a November book. But let's dive into the first one here that I did start a while ago. So this came out in September of 2023, which is Hemlock Island by Kelly Armstrong. This is my first Kelly Armstrong novel, and I'm about a little bit more than 1/3 of the way through, almost at the halfway mark, and I'm very much enjoying it. This is a cottage, comfy, cozy thriller mystery novel. I have a family cottage, and as comfy as it is when I'm there with other people, it's extremely creepy at nighttime if you're reading a thriller novel like this. And there's pure silence, and you hear a few rustles outside in the leaves because there's like some like fox or a mouse or something walking by, and your mind starts to wander. But this has everything that I'm looking for in that kind of a novel. So what it is that there's the main character that inherited, or not inherited, but she received a cottage from a divorce to her rich ex-husband. He wanted to give her money. She didn't want any of that, so he left her the cottage because he bought it essentially for her. The only problem is that she can't afford the cottage on her regular salary, so she ends up creating an Airbnb with it. And what happens is that her latest guests end up leaving in a panic as there's blood in one of the closets. They were freaking out, so she now has to go investigate, and she brings her niece with her. Her ex-husband shows up along with his sister and another female that they know that they grew up with, and her brother, who's a cop, also joins them. So they all go to this island. They have to drive out there, and there's a storm coming in, as per usual. And then that night, some freaky things start to happen. And I've gotten further than that, but I don't want to spoil anything. And it's quite interesting. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in the next little bit. And it's just the idea of a cottage. First of all, I love reading mystery novels at my cottage, and whenever I'm reading a mystery novel and I'm not there, I think of being there, if that makes any sense, because it just has this atmosphere. You can kind of get that too if you're in a living room and you know it's winter, there's a blizzard going on outside, or there's a thunderstorm, and you have just a few lights on, enough to illuminate the book itself that you're reading. You have a blanket, you've got a coffee going or some hot chocolate, something like that. It creates an atmosphere, and this, because it's an actual cottage, is just, my dopamine levels are going crazy high. So I'm very much enjoying it for that reason, and it might be more than just because of the writing style and what's going on. It's also just the feel that I'm getting and the vibe that I'm getting from this book. The other book that I just recently started yesterday is Billy Summers by Stephen King. I'm only like 50 pages in, but I'm very much enjoying this. This is, I don't know if I want to get into details. Okay, they talk about enough about it here so I can talk. Billy Summers is a hitman, and he's getting close to retirement. He's 44 years old, and he, by the sounds of it, he wants to kind of end his career. But he meets up with some of his previous clients that want him to do one last hit. And it's extremely lucrative. He has a specific amount that he normally gets, and this is like 100 times more than what he would normally ask for. So he's considering it, and he would have to kind of live in this area to kind of create a backstory for his character to be in an area for him to do the hit. That's where I'm at so far, and this is my third Stephen King novel. I've read Carrie, I read Salem's Lot. I wanted to go in chronological order of when he had his books published. This was a 2021 novel, so I'm definitely not in that, but my friend wanted to read this, and I said, okay, if you want to read this right now, I'll dive in at the same time. And whereas his other books were horror, this is very much just a thriller type novel with a hitman, but his character work is all, I wouldn't say it's as present as they were in Carrie and Salem's Lot within the first 50 pages of those books, but in this one, I can tell that he's starting it, and it's kind of fun to see Stephen King writing a mystery novel or a thriller novel, mystery thriller, as opposed to a horror novel, which is what I'm used to in the other two books that I'd read from him. So it's and that's generally my favorite kind of genre. So I'm curious to see where this is going to go, and I'm expecting some crazy stuff. Even if there isn't any supernatural elements, there might be. I'm not 100% certain, but I don't think that there is in this one. So, and the other thing too, I love this cover. That's just gorgeous. With the lights, that's nicely done. And apparently, Leonardo DiCaprio has signed on with J.J. Abrams to do a movie adaptation of this. So that's another reason why we want to read it before we see that movie. Because if Leo's on there, it's probably going to be good. I don't necessarily see Leo. I can it makes sense for the casting, but in my mind, Billy Summers hasn't taken on that shape necessarily. But I can totally see it with Leo playing this character so far. Next up is Lord of the Rings: Two Towers. I read this when I was 14. I read The Hobbit 2 years ago. I read Fellowship of the Ring last year around this time, and I've just been dilly-dallying for so long because I want to do a review of Fellowship of the Ring, so that's going to be coming up in the next little while for Fellowship of the Ring, and then I'll dive into this, and then next month in December I'm hoping to do Return of the King, which I've never read. I read like maybe the first 100 pages or so when I was 14, and I said, I'm not really into this. I started reading Harry Potter, and I got into Wheel of Time. Once I started Wheel of Time, I just never went back, and I need to finish that. I have an idea of how it ends, but I've also heard that Return of the King is the movie, the film adaptation. They really stray away from like half of the book. Like everything else seems to be very as close as you can in terms of a movie adaptation, but the like Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers, but Return of the King is they left out half the movie essentially, and that's the longest one. And I think that from what I've heard, it could have made it a lot better, because a lot of people love Return of the King. That's the weakest film in my opinion. Fellowship and Two Towers are excellent, like 10 out of 10s, and I don't give those very often. I don't even think I have 10 movies that have a 10 rating. So I'm extremely picky when it comes to that kind of stuff. Anyway, let's go on with the next one here, which is Sherry Lapina's latest novel that came out this summer at some point in time, which is called Everyone Here Is Lying. It's about a man who had an affair, and when he comes back home, his 9-year-old daughter is left there, and then she goes missing. That's all that I read from there. I just generally enjoy Sherry's work. She does definitely fall under specific amounts of tropes that generally happen in her novels, but I just really enjoy the ride essentially each time that she creates the scene, and it's just it's very comfy. The other thing too is that she is a Canadian author, specifically I think in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. Does it say? Yeah, Toronto, just outside of Toronto, so very close. She's like 4 hours away from me, kind of thing. And so those are the 4 books that I think that I will be completing in this month. But I added one more just in case, because I have been getting into a big wrestling kick, specifically for the territory era of wrestling, which was like in this 1950s, 60s, and 70s, essentially, and then WWF at the time with Vince McMahon went national, and he kind of destroyed all the territories. But that's essentially what I want to read about, is The Death of the Territories by Tim Hornbaker. I've heard very good things about this, and because that it's wrestling related, I generally eat these books up extremely fast. I've read a lot of the autobiographies of wrestlers. I'd say that my favorite was probably Bret Hart's. Was really good. One of them that, unfortunately, Shawn Michaels is one of my favorite wrestlers, for those of you that do watch wrestling, and his book was just, it was okay, and I was expecting so much more from it. It was kind of a letdown. Bret Hart was really good. Mick Foley had some good ones, and Chris Jericho had some good ones. Flair's was pretty good too. I'm gonna have to read. There's another few that I haven't had a chance to read yet. Like Bryan Danielson has a new one, or has an autobiography out. So I'd definitely like to read his. And I haven't read, I think Foley has a 4th one, and Jericho has a third and a fourth one that I haven't read. So those are some that I'm going to definitely be reading. But either way, Death of the Territories, there's a good chance that I'll be reading this, and I'll do a review of that at some point in time as well. So that's it. That's everything that I plan to read in the next few months here, or not few months, within this month. We'll see how I do. I know I'll definitely be able to finish Billy Summers and Hemlock Island. Don't know necessarily after that. Two Towers I should definitely finish as well. So that's everything I'm reading. Let me know in the comments below what you're planning to tackle this month. And you have all been bearded in. Beardage.